Good Thursday evening to you. Hope you are having a great week. Thanks for joining More Sports and Less Levine. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine tonight. We are going to talk plenty of Browns football, and we are going to welcome in Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer, Dan Labbe. Dan, I know you wrote a column during the week about the Browns roster, and you had a line or two from every guy on the roster. When you look at this roster as it's currently constructed, how dramatically different and how much of an upgrade was there from a year ago when you were talking about the Browns roster?
You know, it's funny. The upgrades were sort of targeted. They were, when you kind of look at what they did, they added, a left tackle and a right tackle, and they more fixed some things. Now, on the defensive side, they added a bunch of one-year deals. But I think what it spoke to is there were a lot of guys that just kind of played better under this coaching staff. I'm thinking about a guy like David Njoku, who, we weren't even sure if they would pick up his fifth-year option. They decided to do that. They kind of refused to trade him, and then he finds a role and kind of finds a spot with this team and in this offense. So, the roster was certainly improved, but I really think with a lot of these players, it just came down to better usage and better coaching, and we kind of saw what it can look like a little closer to their ceiling.
It sounds like the most valuable player of the roster upgrade has been Kevin Stefanski and his coaching staff. Is that kind of what you're getting at here?
Yeah, I think so. Him, and then you bring in Bill Callahan and rework the ends of that offensive line and find a guard in Wyatt Teller. You bring in a system that fits your quarterback and kind of fits these receivers you have. And then it's just over and over again, as we've talked about, you just had guys, when it was their turn to step up and play, they made a play or they played really well for an entire game. This was just a really well-coached football team that I really think developed the talent that was here.
How impressive is that, given what this coaching staff had to go through? I mean, you didn't have preseason, you didn't have training camp, you didn't have OTA. There were a lot of things that you could have sat back if you were this coaching staff and said, well, we didn't have this, we didn't have this, we didn't have this. But somehow they found a way to get a football team ready to play and improve.
That's really the most impressive part. They had to do so much of it virtually. And then even as the season went along, they were losing, in-person meetings. They were losing practices towards the end of the year. They just weren't able to practice at all in some of those final weeks and even in that week leading up to the Steelers playoff game. So it was just really impressive how they were able to kind of use the tools they had at least and develop these guys. And I think what it comes down to is putting them in the right positions. So, maybe you couldn't, sit in a meeting room with a guy and coach him up all day. And you had some limited time on the practice field. But if you understood what a guy could do and you put him in the right spot, then he can excel in it. And I really think that's what this coaching staff did up and down this roster.
All right, let's look at the roster. What are some of the areas that you think were strengths? And maybe we'll do strengths, and then some of the areas that were kind of under the radar, but still pretty good.
Yeah, I think most of the strengths were probably on the offensive side. You got to start with the offensive line. That was the best unit on the football team, right? You can talk about the running backs, but I kind of put them in that group too as part of the running game. So I think the offensive line was really the strength of this football team. One of the areas that I think was maybe sneaky good, and it's because kind of how it played out, I think we knew this team was good at wide receiver at the top with Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, but then you lose Odell Beckham to the torn ACL, and they managed to find a guy in Kaderil Hodge who contributed, a guy in Donovan Peoples-Jones who was a sixth-round pick, and he played really well for them down the stretch and made some big plays. They really kind of developed some of these younger wide receivers and found ways to use them. And so I think that was, even though it was strong at the top with Landry and Beckham, I think that was kind of a sneaky area of the team that was stronger than I thought it would be lower down the depth chart.
And when you look at some of the areas that maybe the Browns thought were going to be strengths that, didn't quite pan out the way they wanted to, and in some areas that, as you look forward, you really need to upgrade to get where you ultimately want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to start on that defensive side of the ball, I think. And really, I look at the secondary. You have Denzel Ward over there. You feel good about your safeties, I think, with Ronnie Harrison and Grant Delpit, but we just don't know how Delpit's going to come back from that Achilles injury. But you don't know what else you've got at corner. You don't know what you're going to get out of Greedy Williams. Kevin Johnson, you signed him for a year. He was okay. He's a versatile guy. Maybe keep him around for that. MJ Stewart made a couple plays, but they really need to figure out that secondary and how they want to use guys. Because I think in a perfect world, you're going to see more 5 defensive backs. You're going to see more 3 safety sets than what we saw this year when this whole group is healthy. But you've got to have a strong second corner, and you've got to figure out who the guy is that's going to play inside in those nickel packages. So I think the secondary is really an area that I would focus on.
You know, a lot of people expected the defensive line to kind of dominate, and we'd said a number of times, boy, if that's the way they're going to have to be. Myles Garrett was on the way to doing that, but you know, you could never get 2 or 3 of those guys healthy at the same time and playing at a high level at the same time. Do you think they kind of try to reload there as well?
Yeah, I think they have to, and especially at end, because you need to have another edge rusher to go with Myles Garrett. I think on the interior, they're going to be okay. You know, you probably lose Larry Ogunjobi, you're probably going to let him walk, but you have, you know, Sheldon Richardson here for another year who played really well, Jordan Elliott, a rookie who should get an opportunity, and they're going to get Andrew Billings back, who they signed this last offseason. He opted out. Now, what does a year off football do to a guy? You know, we'll find out. He's still pretty young, so it might not impact him that much, but you know, they have some guys that they can try on the inside, but they need to go out and they need to find probably a veteran edge rusher that they can bring in part-time duty, but then also find kind of a younger full-time guy that they can say, this is going to be the guy we're going to pair with Myles Garrett for the next however many years. Whether that's in the draft, whether it's in free agency, I think there'll be some younger edge rushers out there available that you can go get if you're willing to pay for them. They just need to find that guy to put on the other side of Myles.
What about this roster could very well end up having some salary cap casualties. We usually don't have to talk about that with the Browns because there usually aren't those kind of decisions. Who are some tough decisions salary cap wise that Andrew Berry may look at and say, boy, I'd love to have you back, but this does not make sense with what we're trying to do?
You know, one name I mentioned is a guy like Sheldon Richardson. I think his cap number is somewhere around $13 million. Now, I'd be willing to take that cap hit on for another year to have him in the middle of the line, and I'm sure the Browns would too because of how he played this year. But you always look at guys who are a little older and have those big numbers, and maybe you have some guys behind them who could step in and play. You know, Sheldon Richardson, I don't think it would happen, but he's a guy you kind of keep an eye on. And look, you've got to talk about those 2 receivers at the top. Odell Beckham coming off an ACL, a lot of money. Jarvis Landry, Andrew Berry talks about wanting to add speed to the roster. For everything Jarvis does, and I would be a little leery about moving on from him after this year. And for everything he does, he's not fast. And so you've got to kind of weigh, do you kind of value all that stuff Jarvis brings that maybe isn't being that downfield threat? Can you still work him in with the money that you have to pay him? Those might be. There's not a lot of big money guys on this roster right now, but those are a couple guys to keep an eye on. And, look, I think in some years, maybe J.C. Treader would be a guy you'd look at too. He makes a lot of money, and you drafted a center in the 5th round last year. But I wouldn't even think about moving on from J.C. Treader.
All in all, the Browns appear to be in decent shape salary cap-wise. And you mentioned, because of the pandemic, the league and the Players Association has to agree what the cap will be. That will be negotiated at some time after the Super Bowl before the league year starts in March or whenever they decide it starts this year. So those are things that will definitely impact, one, how much money the Browns have to extend their own people, how much money they have to kind of go after others as well.
And it might end up benefiting the Browns because it might mean that some teams have to move on from guys they didn't intend to move on from. Maybe they're crunched a little bit more in the cap than they were. And I think the Browns are still going to have some flexibility because even if they start extending guys, those extensions, they aren't going to necessarily kick in right away. So the cap hits aren't going to balloon necessarily next year. That'll be, down the road a little way. So they can buy some time. They can get creative if they want to restructure some guys, whatever they want to do. But in kind of a weird way, I think it might benefit the Browns because, they'll have less money to spend, but they'll still have more money than a lot of other teams. And we just might see some weird cap casualties with some teams that have to do extensions with their own guys, or, a team like New Orleans is in just a disaster salary cap wise. So maybe they let somebody get to the market that maybe they normally would.
Well, you mentioned that a couple of the guys that we can talk about that may be in that situation. We'll start with cornerbacks, where we've talked about. Stephen Gilmore for the Patriots is one that could be a cap casualty. Marcus Peters from the Ravens, same division. And then you alluded to the Saints. There's some thought that Marshawn Lattimore might be a guy that's a cap casualty. Glenville guy, and, I would think he'd look awfully attractive opposite, Denzel Ward wearing that orange helmet.
Yeah, if New Orleans wanted to move on from him, I'd certainly take a look. He's still young. I'm sure they can do some cap gymnastics to keep him, but they're going to have to let somebody go there. And if it comes down to, hey, they've got to turn around and trade Marshawn Lattimore, he's definitely a guy that the Browns need to make a phone call with. And that's the other thing to keep in mind here is I think Andrew Berry is going to use some of these draft picks, not in the actual draft, but to maybe trade for some guys and bring in some veteran guys. Marcus Peters would certainly be interesting with his history with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and that kind of Ravens-Browns thing. But funny things happen when you bring a guy into your locker room that you think can help win. Some of those grudges get forgotten pretty quickly. Another guy in New Orleans that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, he's headed for free agency, and I don't know if they'll be able to re-sign him, is Trey Hendrickson, an edge rusher. Had a really nice year this year, drafted the same year as Myles Garrett, has pretty good athletic traits if you kind of go back and look what he did at the combine and the lead up to the draft that year. So, he's a guy that maybe New Orleans would want to re-sign, but if they want to keep a guy like Lattimore, maybe they can.
Well, and then the other two edge rushers who could end up being on the market are J.J. Watt and Von Miller. Now, Von Miller's coming off an injury, which, again, you may not want to take that big salary on if you are the Broncos, so you may let him go.
Right, and I do think the Browns are going to tend to want to get guys that are kind of going into their second contracts or younger guys kind of in their mid-20s. But look, if a guy like J.J. Watt were available and you could get him and add him as a nice veteran presence, a guy like Von Miller as well, who of course Myles Garrett knows well, I think you consider everything with this team because you're going into next year. You want to win your division. You want to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to be where the Chiefs are right now. So you kind of consider everything. And if that means you have to take on somebody a little older than maybe you like, maybe a little shorter term than you'd want, you have to think about it.
Well, absolutely. And, look no further than Jadeveon Clowney. The Browns went pretty hard after him. So do you think that is kind of the MO? Let's get somebody who can come in. We don't need to necessarily see him develop, somebody that can help Garrett get after it as that other bookend.
Yeah, I think you want a guy that can do it right now. So whether that's a day one ready guy at number 26, or it's somebody that you know who he is, like I mentioned, a Hendrickson or some of those other names that we mentioned, somebody who can do a lot of the things you like on that other end. Look, I think there's a chance that Olivier Vernon could have been brought back had he not ruptured that Achilles, and maybe he does come back on a shorter deal, but you're still not going to have him for a while, even if you were to stick around, and whatever you got out of him would be a bonus. So, yeah, I think you need a guy that can step in week one and impact the quarterback and help Myles Garrett really take that next step to becoming the defensive player of the year.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Dan and I will continue to talk Browns football as they rebuild and build out this roster, trying to get where they want to go. The AFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. Most sports. And Les Levine will be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Do you like Ohio State football? Would you like to get information from me, Doug Lesmerises, about Ohio State football without having to look at my face? We have got the plan for you. Become an Ohio State text subscriber through cleveland.com. You send a text, 614-350-3315. What do you get? 2, 3, 4 texts right in your phone every day about Ohio State football. Inside information, polls, voting, all kinds of things. You can be on our podcast. We take text subscriber questions on our Buckeye Talk podcast every week. If you really want to be involved with Ohio State football, in season or out of season, become an Ohio State text subscriber from cleveland.com. Send a text to 614-350-3315. 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? $3.99 a month after that. 350-3315. I'll see you in your phone.
Tri-C is here for you. Now more than ever, you need a post-secondary education. So I encourage you to start your journey here at Tri-C. The majority of fall classes will take place online, but we've added a variety of formats to meet your learning needs, and we've taken many steps to keep you safe on campus. Whether you're ready to get started or your four-year plans have changed, Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. More sports and Les Levine continues. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine tonight. Let's bring back in Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. Dan, one of the areas it was pretty apparent the Browns need to improve speed, both sides of the ball, really. And when you talk about speed at the wide receiver position, is it as simple as Odell Beckham coming back, or do you think they may, being the front office, may be looking for even a further upgrade?
I think they'll look to further upgrade. And again, that's an option maybe you could do at number 26. I wouldn't rule out going offense at number 26, especially if it were the right receiver, or if they move up a couple spots to maybe get a guy they really like. I wouldn't rule that out. I think you need to see what's out there in free agency, because they do need to be faster. Now, Donovan Peoples-Jones showed you something, right? But he's still a guy that, was kind of limited in what he did. You want to see him continue to develop, but you also maybe don't want to bank on him as being that guy going into next season. So I think they'll explore every opportunity. And again, this is one of those areas with everything with this front office. Just keep an eye on who teams might want to trade, who you might be able to give up a third-round pick for, or a pick next year for, something like that. I think this front office is going to be really creative in trying to find who might be available, even if it's not a free agent.
Well, the interesting thing is, again, we've mentioned salary cap issues and some wide receivers whose names keep popping out as potential cap casualties. Brandon Cooks from the Texans, Tyler Lockett of the Seahawks. Now, they have DK Metcalf, so that could be, and John Brown of the Bills. So those guys are speed guys. The other guy that kind of jumps out, from down south, Ross, the guy that set the combine record, had his fifth-year option declined by the Bengals. So Ross is a free agent. He ran a 4.26 at the combine. Now, he has not been a great 4 years in the NFL, but he's got some speed.
Yeah, I mean, if he's a guy you can take a flyer on and he's not real expensive, you bring him in and give him a look to see what he can do. Sure, go after it. Chad O'Shea is a really good wide receivers coach. We saw what he did with this group. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. This is a guy that can develop receivers. So, yeah, I mean, if John Ross is a guy you want to take a look at, they brought in JoJo Natson last year to return a kick, a guy who's really fast. But we saw they used him a little bit on offense, and they used him before he tore his ACL on some end arounds and things like that, or at least to show some of that stuff. So if they've got a guy with some tools, even if he's not necessarily the perfect receiver or the perfect specimen at that position, they'll figure out a way to use him. So if they really like that speed and think there's something to salvage there, yeah, I would kick the tires on John Ross and see what he could do here.
It's really interesting because when you think speed guy, you think, okay, he's going to run 60 yards down and Baker Mayfield is going to crank it up. Look at the way the Chiefs used Tyreek Hill. Line him up at one spot, run him all the way across the field and see if anybody can keep up with him and get him the ball in stride.
Right, and the thing about the NFL now is it's so much about not just motion, but motion at the snap, and the Chiefs are one of the best teams in the NFL at using that, and they use Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and all of those guys, and we'll see. Sometimes Tyreek Hill will run 100 yards, it seems like, before the ball's even snapped, but it's just so hard to kind of know where he's going to be and know what he's going to do after the snap. So when you have somebody with that kind of speed, and then you just throw in his ability as a receiver, it's almost undefensible.
Yeah, the other thing that the Browns will have to do is decide now, options, who you extend, and there will be some tough decisions. The one that jumps out is Baker Mayfield. I think we've talked about this. They're going to pick up that fifth-year option. That's just a matter of we have to wait till the Super Bowl ends so they can do that. Do you think they wait to extend his contract? See 16 more games may cost them some money, but it would be money well spent if they're more comfortable on what they have, and he is the guy they want long term?
I just really feel like it's something they're going to try and do this year. Andrew Berry doesn't say much, but he did drop a little nugget when we talked at the end of the season when he said, basically, Baker is on the same trajectory as Myles Garrett. And they did Myles Garrett's contract last summer. He just never felt comfortable talking about Garrett's contract in those press conference settings. And when he said that, it just kind of piqued my interest a little bit because it sounded a lot like he was saying, yeah, we're going to do Baker's contract, but I'm not going to tell you guys we're going to do Baker's contract because I just don't talk about that stuff in press conferences. Now, there could be a situation, and they would have all kinds of cover here, both sides, or if they said, look, we've got a bunch of extensions to do this year. Baker, why don't you take one for the team and wait till next year, and Baker can make himself look really good, and he can wait and maybe get paid even more money after next season if he has the type of season we think he can have. But I do think the Browns want to get something done because, when you don't do it, even if you pick up that fifth-year option, when you don't do that extension when you're able to, it just raises a lot of questions and creates a lot of noise on the outside. And to be honest, I think sometimes some guys on the inside might kind of look and wonder, why didn't they do Baker's contract? That's weird.
Another one that comes due at the same time is Denzel Ward. And that's got to be a tough one because when he's been on the field, he's been really good, but he's missed more games than you would want for an elite defender.
Yeah, 12 games every season. Now, he did miss a couple games with COVID, which is one that you really can't hold against him. But, we've seen the soft tissue stuff. We've seen concussions. He's kind of run the gamut with why he's missed games so far in his career. That's the one concern. I mean, if he had played 16 games every year or maybe just had that rookie year with the concussions, you'd say, okay, just pay the guy, no brainer. Again, this is a guy, though, when you look at the position, you look at the importance of the position, it kind of goes quarterback, edge rusher, cornerback. So it's an expensive position, but if you can lock him down, I think you have to do it this offseason and kind of go forward with him as your number one corner and build your secondary around that.
Yeah, and you're spending an awful lot of money. We're running out of cap space quickly.
That's not my money.
Nick Chubb's another one. You don't have the luxury of the fifth-year option because he is a second-round pick, so you don't have that. Conventional wisdom says you don't pay a lot for running backs, but I think Nick Chubb, that might be a different element because of this offense and what Nick Chubb means to this offense. Do you feel that way, or am I looking at the sky going, boy, we got pretty pink pictures up there?
Well, I'm about to spend a little more of Jimmy Haslam's money here. So, with Nick Chubb, we always say that this is the guy you've got to pay when it comes to running back. We can just go back through the list of names. Well, you've got to pay Ezekiel Elliott, right? And that one so far hasn't aged well. You got to pay Todd Gurley. He's not even with the Rams anymore. There's always a guy that you've got to pay, and it just ends up not aging well. That being said, you look at the deal Derrick Henry got. You look at what Joe Mixon got in Cincinnati. So if you could sit down with Nick Chubb and do, say, a 4-year deal somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million a year, you could kind of pay for his prime here over the next couple of years. And then when you get past those 2 years, have some flexibility in that contract where if it does start to tail off, you can save yourself money. Because really in the NFL, every contract is pretty much a 2-year deal. Usually after 2 years, there's some friendly ways that you can move on and save yourself money. So I think Nick Chubb is sort of in this perfect spot right now where you could give him, say, a 4-year contract. For the next 3 years, you'd be paying for some of those prime years, and then you could start to make some decisions year to year on him.
Last one I'll ask you about, we'll take a time out after this. Wyatt Teller, that's a guy that probably played his way into a pretty hefty contract coming up as Wyatt Teller went from question mark to arguably one of the best guards in the NFL.
Yeah, and this is one where it gets tough. Some people might argue you could pay Wyatt Teller over Nick Chubb, and I could certainly hear that argument. But you also have to remember this is a guard. You've got a lot of money tied up in that offensive line. So this one might come down to kind of what does Wyatt Teller want? Now you've got him next season. He's under contract, so you don't have to necessarily pay him this offseason. You can maybe get away. I don't think that would create the whispers that it would if you waited on Baker Mayfield or someone like that. Maybe you kind of go into next season, see how it goes, kind of see what your guard situation looks like. Wyatt Teller's going to be a tough one. It might just depend on how much he wants. If it's a Joel Bitonio type contract like they paid a couple years ago, maybe you can do that. But that's going to be an interesting one to see how they approach that position, because that offensive line, even with Jedrick Wills on a rookie contract, that offensive line is pretty expensive.
Yeah, there's this thing called the salary cap that we have to worry about too, Dan, but we'll get into that later. We're going to take a timeout. Dan and I will continue to spend Jimmy Haslam's money and talk Browns football. More sports and less Levine. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Shelly, we really need to get Nature Stone in our basement.
I know, Herb, and it would look great in our laundry room, too.
Coach, only Nature Stone is perfect for your basement and laundry room because it never needs replaced like damp carpet and moldy tile. That's why it comes with Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty.
And Nature Stone is absolutely beautiful and so easy to clean.
Schedule today at naturestone.com and get up to half your basement or laundry room floor free. Hurry, offer ends soon.
Shelly, Nature Stone is perfect for our laundry room and basement.
I told you.
It's not just a floor. Wow,
it's Nature Stone.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions, or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
More sports and Les Levine continues. Dave Bacon filling in for Les Levine tonight. Let's bring back in Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. Dan, when you look at the Browns, they're at a unique spot now. They won a playoff game. They now have to kind of focus on how do we get better to compete for championships. Andrew Berry has said you don't do it by focusing on, boy, we have to beat this one team. But the challenge is, getting from where they are to that next level is a big step compared to getting to non-playoff to playoff team. And how do you do it? What are some of the keys? How do you get to that elite level?
So I think it starts with, you're going to have some stability, which sounds strange, but that's just something this organization has needed. You're going to have the same head coach, the same system, the same quarterback. You're going to be able to kind of advance within this system and start to grow to that graduate level understanding of the system. So that alone is going to help this team get better. But really it just comes down to, and I thought Andrew Berry was really smart to say this, he doesn't look at it like, hey, we had a really good year and we're like one or two pieces away. So that's all we need to do. He looks at it as in the Browns, every year is different. And so he's going to be aggressive to go out and improve this roster. I think they're going to take a very critical look at every piece of this roster and how everything fits together. And they might have to make some difficult decisions and make some tough changes where people maybe don't expect it. But the one thing Andrew Berry has shown us in his short time as GM is he's going to be aggressive and he's going to go out and try to improve this roster and create competition across the board, which I think is also really important to make sure guys are coming in and they know that no matter what they did last year, they've got to compete and keep getting better, because that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. I'm sure there will be one or two moves involving the roster that are a little bit of surprises. But again, the mindset is if you're staying the same, everybody else is passing you by. You need to move it forward and get better. And that's going to be especially important, I think, on the defensive side of the ball. I think when they took over, they wouldn't tell you this, but there was a plan. We're going to put everything around the quarterback so we can determine Baker Mayfield and the offense. And the defense got shortchanged, and now I think it's time to put a lot of resources into improving that defense, or as many resources as they can into the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, really kind of buy into what Joe Woods wants this defense to be. I really do think when Grant Delpit got hurt, and maybe it speaks to the way they built this defense, and they just didn't quite do enough. And I think we all kind of knew that anyway. But when Grant Delpit got hurt, it really changed the way this defense was going to look and how it was going to play. And it's why they had to go out and use that 5th-round pick to get Ronnie Harrison, which is a deal maybe they would have been looking at anyway. But they needed to bring in a guy that could do some of the things Grant Delpit could do. This team's going to play 3 safeties. This team's going to have a versatile guy that can kind of play in that linebacker, safety, nickel role. And so getting him back is big. And then you just kind of keep adding on, right? You hope maybe Ronnie Harrison can be an every down safety next year and the starter with Delpit. You've got to fix cornerback like we talked about, and you've got to up that pass rush. You can't just be happy. You've got to give Joe Woods everything he needs to kind of show, hey, last year when you guys were critical of me, it was just because maybe I didn't have the bodies. Give him what he wants for this defense.
What do you think a Joe Woods defense looks like when it has all the pieces? What do you expect to see if Joe Woods, gets what he would like to have?
I think it starts up front. This is a guy that was a defensive coordinator in Denver. We know that Denver has always been a team that gets after the quarterback. He was the DB's coach in San Francisco, and that was really kind of their bread and butter, rushing with 4, having a really strong front 4, and being able to wreak havoc with those 4 guys up front. And then what you're able to do in the secondary is, you can put more safeties on the field. You can do different things to be more versatile. I know everybody loves linebackers. I kind of like a good old school linebacker, but I just don't think it's going to happen with this team. I think they value versatility. And, when you look at how the Browns play offense, they kind of hunt matchups with linebackers. So I doubt Kevin Stefanski is doing that on one side and saying, yeah, we need more linebackers on our roster on the other. I think this team wants to be versatile, be able to play a bunch of different ways with that secondary, because when you're playing a Lamar Jackson twice a year, you've got to have speed. When you're playing Patrick Mahomes, they're going to play Patrick Mahomes in the regular season next year, and they would hope in the playoffs again next year. You've got to be able to handle him and handle all those Kansas City weapons. So I think they want to have a lot of multiple things to do in the back end of that defense.
And the other thing is, it certainly sounds like you're saying they need more speed on the defensive side of the ball to be what Joe Woods wants them to be. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I think they want speed across the board, but especially on the defense. You've got to be fast to deal with a lot of these teams that are, this league is just getting faster and faster, and all the best teams have that kind of speed on the outside, speed in the backfield. Some of them have that speed at quarterback. So you've got to have speed across the board. And the other thing to remember is turnovers can be a little fickle. So this team forced a bunch of turnovers this year. I don't think you can go into next year just relying on the fact that, hey, they're going to get a bunch of turnovers again. They've got to upgrade the talent on this roster and make sure that they have guys that can get after the quarterback and then make plays on the back end.
Last thing I'll ask you before I let you go. A lot of this offseason and scouting is going to end up being virtual. You'll be able to do some pro days and those kind of things. But Andrew Berry didn't seem to shy away from that. He kind of felt like they had it figured out. And, the results seem to speak that they do have it figured out. Do you think it's a little bit of an advantage that everything is going to be virtual for this draft, or more things than usual are going to be virtual for this draft?
Yeah, I think the fact that they went through it last year and really most of the league went through it last year, they have a better idea of how to do things. Hopefully they'll be able to, as the spring goes along, be able to have some more people present at some of these pro days and things like that. But, the real key is going to be getting some of the medicals and the things you get at the combine when you can sit in one of those suites at Lucas Oil Stadium and guys just come through all day and you get to interview them. And, you get medicals on every prospect that goes to the combine. That's the stuff that's going to be really important for them to figure out, because you've got game tape to work with. You've got an idea of kind of who you like. You're going to be able to check out some of these pro days. These testing numbers are going to be available. So all of that stuff is still going to be out there. But you do lose something, I think, when you don't necessarily get to sit in a room with a guy and, put him on that whiteboard or kind of get a feel for how he looks and how he moves and things like that. So it's hard, but the good news is they went through it last year, and I think they're equipped to do it again this year.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. As always, we appreciate the time and the insight. I'm sure we will continue to talk Browns football again next week. That'll do it for this edition of More Sports and Less Levine. Join us tomorrow. Ellis Williams will be the guest. We'll talk some Browns football, and we'll look ahead to the Senior Bowl and some draft prospects with Ellis Williams. Stay safe, everybody, and we will see you again tomorrow night.